Hello, hello, hello. This is Chris Ferdinandi from GoMakeThings.com. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to be taking the tic-tac-toe web component that we built last week, and we're going to be converting it from just plain old DOM manipulation into a state-based UI web component. So if you missed last week, what we ended up doing was we took the default flagship React tutorial, which is building a tic-tac-toe game. And we created a really, I don't want to say really simple, we created a web component version of it that uses just all browser native tech and traditional DOM manipulation to build a tic-tac-toe game where you can select your squares and the game keeps track of what you've done, identifies the winner, lets you jump back and forth to different versions in history and play all over again or start the game over again if you'd prefer. So we're going to take that and we're going to convert it into a web component that uses state-based UI internally. Just real quick before we jump into this, if this sounds like something that's interesting to you, please leave a comment and let me know. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask those in the comments too. You can find all of the source code for what we're looking at today down in the description. And if you really like the video, please like it or subscribe to the channel because that lets YouTube know that this is good, shares it with other people, helps grow the channel, and spreads the word about building a simpler and more resilient web. So with that out of the way, let's quickly recap what we did last week, and then we'll take a look at what we're doing this week. So we have a web component here that uses a tic-tac-toe custom element, and it creates a new web component out of that. We've got some properties that we're keeping track of. We render a game board, and then along the way, as users click different elements in here, we are running our handle event method to update the squares, to jump to different places, to update the status, to update the game info. So there's a lot of targeting specific elements and making updates to them. When we update to state-based UI, what we're going to do is we're still going to have some properties that we keep track of, but we're going to use what's called a signal to listen to those, or to detect rather, when the properties of those, or the values of those properties change. And when we do, we're going to, rather than us selectively saying, update this thing, update that thing, we're going to say, when the properties look like this, the UI should look like this. When the properties look like that, the UI should look like that instead. Under the hood, we're still going to target and update specific elements, but we're not going to be the ones who are going to do it. We're going to use a small library to do it for us. You theoretically could use no library at all. You could just set this inner HTML equals and wipe out the whole UI. But when you do that, let's say I clicked here, focus will shift back up to the document body because the element I was focused on no longer exists. If you're a screen reader user or a keyboard user, that creates a really terrible user experience. So what we want to do is instead have some sort of tool that loops through each of the elements, detects what's different about the current UI from how it should look, and make just those changes. So for this, we're going to be using my tiny state-based UI library, Reef. Unlike React, it's really small. It's only a few kilobytes instead of many kilobytes, gzipped and minified, and actually megabytes after it gets unpacked. So it's much tinier. It doesn't use JSX or anything like that. It's just plain old vanilla JavaScript with template literals under the hood. So if you're comfortable with JavaScript, you can jump right in and start writing this. You don't need to transpile your code or run Babel in the browser or do anything like that. So it's going to be lean, simple, awesome. And it's got a whole section on how to use it with web components in the docs. So if you want something that's more React-like, but you don't want all the weight of React, I also really strongly recommend Preact. So it has a very similar API to React, but their version right here is showing JSX, but they even have a version of it that you can use with just template literals. So highly recommend that, just as an aside here. And if you don't know much about state-based UI and you want to learn more about how it works, over at the Lean Web Club, I actually have a whole course on state-based UI that includes building out your own state-based UI library. So head over to leanwebclub.com today to sign up for that for free as well. So with that out of the way, let's actually start building our state-based UI version. So I've got a separate file here for that. And the first thing we need to do is install Reef. So if I jump over to getting started, there is an ES module version of this that I typically use for real projects. But today, we're just going to grab the CDN version because I don't want to deal with spinning up a server to run my ES modules. And then inside our code, we can say let signal and component equal Reef. And this will pull those properties of this global IFI, this Reef object, out into their own variables. So we can use them just like as if we had used ES imports. And if you ever want to move this over into an ES module, you don't have to change anything other than how you're loading the code from the CDN. We're going to reload the page. We should see pretty much nothing change, except I should see signal as an actual like function I can use. So no errors there, which is great. So let's also update the way this board is designed here. So currently we've got the status that's empty, this thing that gets built out manually over time, using update status, update history. We're grabbing these elements. We're not going to do that. So I'm going to keep this here for now, but we don't want to update status or update history. So let me comment these out with the intent that we will delete them later. Let me add a little to do for myself so I don't forget that. And we'll start by handling the status. So we've got this winner property that tells us if there's a winner yet or not. I just opened this in a separate tab so we can jump back and forth between the two. Inside update status, if there's a winner, we show winner. Otherwise, we show next player. So I'm going to just take this and I'm going to drop it in here. I'm going to use this inside my template literal here so that I can do it allows you to add variables and things like that inside your string, but I'm also going to use it to do a ternary operator to say if there's a winner, we're going to show who the winner is. Otherwise, we're going to say next player equals. Cool. And if I reload, we should see we've got the same thing we had before, even though we're not rendering our update. So next player X. And if there was a winner, it would theoretically show who that is. For this section, I want to handle all of this with state-based UI as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to have this square. So this was currently a we were doing this. We were grabbing all of the different like squares from the UI and setting their value, or literally just saving the squares. And then further down, I was setting the square value. So get square value. So for each one, we were checking, is it filled or does it have, does it have a value? Is filled was having the value of, or was displaying the value of the item. What we're going to do here is we want to, I'm like jumping around a fair bit. We want to create our initial array with all of the different possible values that could be. That's not what I meant to say. Sorry. We want to create an empty array with the initial values. And I'm actually going to jump over to the React version to steal that. They've got their array. Yeah, here we go. So they're setting up a default array here. So it's an empty array and it's being filled with null. So we're going to do that. We're going to say this. So this squares, and we've got an initial array of just empty stuff. And we'll use that to set our values on each item here. What am I doing in mine? So if it has the attribute, so it could have the attribute with a value of of null as well. All right, that's entirely possible. Okay, so let's do this then. Let's create our buttons. So we are going to, instead of doing what we were doing here, we're going to use array map on our history. Yeah, on our history. So this history, and history will have, I guess we want to set a default for that. So let's go look at how we update history currently. Yeah, so we do this. We're getting our square values. So the board state, we actually don't need to get the values anymore because it's just going to be this squares. Next move and winner. Okay. Fantastic. So in that case, let's leave this empty and then we'll just update it, right? So we'll say set default history. This update history. Excellent. So this is going to push that first entry in for us. And here we can say this history map. And so what the array map method is going to do is it's going to loop through each item in our array and create a new array from it. In our case, we're going to create an array of HTML strings. So we will say entry, index, and then for each one, we're going to return this string here. And instead of jumping to 0, we're going to jump to the index. And then we'll just make this conditional. So right now, we've got, where is it? It's go to move or go to game start. So we're going to update this, right? So we'll say if index equals 0, we'll go to game start. Otherwise, we go to move, and we don't need the history length anymore. We'll just go to the index. So let me just really quickly reload the page. And yeah, so we've got go to game start, next player equals X, no errors in the console. Great, beautiful, perfect start. We can wipe these out now because we don't need those. I don't need to update the status because that's going to be handled via our state-based UI. And I'm already setting the default history. So now let's actually go ahead and let's start adding some state-based UI to this. So if I jump over to advanced, I've got a whole section on how to do this with web components. And one of the things we want to do is we want to create a signal. This is a thing that it's an object or a value, could be a primitive that you update, and it lets other functions know, hey, this thing has changed. Go ahead and re-render the UI. And the thing that re-renders the UI is component. I also have some information on scoping. So in our case, we probably want to scope our properties to the web component because that's a big value of using web components. So we're going to generate a unique ID for each component, and that's going to allow us to make our rendering a little bit more efficient. So if you had more of these on the page, it will only notify the component like about properties inside it. So we will say this UUID. I'm lazy, so let's just, we'll leave it as UUID. I just copy pasted it. I was going to drop one of the U's, but we don't need to do that. And then we're going to create our signal. And in this case, we really only need to do that with the squares. So we will update the squares, and that will trigger all of the other renders. So we'll say squares, and then in our case, we're going to use this UUID as a unique identifier on this signal. So just for starters, I'm going to reload the page, and you'll see nothing has changed. This is still, it's going to return the array. It's still just, just kind of, it's still just an array under the hood, but it's wrapped in a proxy. This is how view works under the hood as well. Next, that template that we're rendering in, we're going to create a new template property that we use to render that. So let's go this template. And what we need to do here, we need to have a function that returns a string. So the reason I'm using an arrow function here is it allows us to preserve access to all of the properties of our component. If we didn't have that, it wouldn't work exactly right. So let's go ahead and we'll paste this in, and we're going to return it. So we'll go return, and then finally, we're going to create our component. We don't need events on this one, but we do need the template and our signals. So we'll wipe this out, get rid of this, and we can even pull this up onto one line because we really just have that one property. So just to explain what's happening here, we've got a component. We're passing in the so the thing we're scoped to, this template, and sorry, not just the thing we're scoped to. So this is the element that we're rendering into. So in this case, this is the web component. This template is a function that will run every time one of our signals updates. And we're also telling it only listen to signals with this ID. That way it won't run every time any signal anywhere updates. So if you had multiple ones on a page, we only want it to update for these signals. So if we reload the page, excellent. We still have our board. That's good. Next, and here, let's comment this, right? So the UI template, it returns a string. The HTML, actually, that's not true. It returns a function, doesn't it? Function. A function that returns the HTML string. Cool. All right, so we've got this here. We're handling events. We're going to need to change that in a minute. Inside our template, let's go ahead and actually start mapping some values in. So we're going to use a key. Yeah, so let's say key equals, and then we need one of these for each index. So key, all right, so 1 through 9. So we're trying to map these to the squares. All right, and 7, 8. And we also maybe want an is filled on here, right? So we'll say is filled equals, and I will do this for each of these as well. All right, so what we're going to do here is we will say we're going to use a ternary operator. So if this squares, and then we need to get the index. We will do this individually on each of these. So if this square's index does not equal null, how do I want to, it does not equal null, then we will set a value of true. Otherwise, we're going to give it a value of false. Just real quick on why we're doing that. So if I jump back over to the advanced section, I have things set up where attributes can be controlled by the DOM diffing mechanism. Is this only for form attributes? Let's see. To dynamically set, check, selected, and value. Okay, yeah. So in that case, we'll do this a little bit differently, actually. So if this squares equals null, we'll return an empty string. Otherwise, we are going to say is filled equals, and we actually don't even need, I don't even think we need the value. So we'll just set it as is filled. And then in here, we are, I'm gonna add a number here, like an index. We'll get to that in a minute. Finally, over here, we're gonna do something very similar. So if this squares, you know what? We don't need this at all. I'm thinking about this. We can rely entirely on the squares for this. So I don't need to do this at all. Nope. It's only this part. So if the value equals null, this is an empty string. Again, I keep doing this. Otherwise, oh, actually, here, there's an even simpler way to, well, no, we'll do this for now. Otherwise, we set, yeah, no, we'll do this. We'll do the really, sorry, I'm like working through this in real time in my head. Okay, so if this square's index has a value, we're going to use it. Otherwise, we're going to use an empty string. And so we will just repeat this a whole bunch of times, and then I'll go drop in the numbers. So we will go, oh yeah, and is filled. Here we go. I can get rid of that. I made a mistake by putting that in the first place. So we'll go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I just want to check that everything looks the way I would expect, because there's a possibility I messed this up. Yeah, so we've got a bunch of commas because, where is it? This history map, this should be join, like that. No, interesting. Okay, what am I seeing here? Let's take a look. We've got our first bug. Okay, this squares. All right, so let's go ahead and console log this squares. Let's see what we've got. So we've got an array. Oh, okay. So this squares is wrong. We've got an array inside an array, and we don't want that. We just need just an array. So let's try that now. There we go. This is what I expected. We've got our array with a bunch of values. Perfect. Okay. So that was a copy paste error. Excellent. So we can wipe that out. So now we've got all of our values. I'm using a key as a way to identify which index belongs to this square. The key is also going to make diffing more efficient. So inside the diffing engine here, and this is something you'll see in React as well, having a key or an ID means that the when Reef loops through, it will match specific items against their keys and move things around if it has to. It just makes diffing under the hood a lot more efficient. Provides a unique identifier without having to be beholden to how valid IDs work. So this could be like a whole string if I wanted it to be. Okay, cool. So we've got our board here. Next, we've got handle squares and handle jump to. So this is where actually handling clicks and things starts to come into play. So let's look at how we handle squares. So first, we're making sure it's an actual square. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna wipe out the is filled portion for now. So if there's no button or if there's already a winner, we're not gonna do anything. In fact, we could probably even move this button up. But let's get the button key. So let key equals this button get attribute key. So this is going to return a string, not a number. So if I were to do something like, say, if key exists, if this was a number and that key was 0, we would get an error. But because it's a string, it'll still validate as yes, it has a value. But so we can say if no key, we're going to return. Otherwise, oh, also, that's right, or if it's filled. So if there's no key, or this square's key does not equal null. Okay, so if it already has a value, we're going to bail. Now, we're not going to update the text of the button. We are going to update the value inside this squares. So what we do instead is we say this squares key equals this next move. This will trigger a UI update. But we also need to update the next move. So let's update that as well. We'll probably want to make that a signal then as well. So hold on. So actually, it'll be fine because this batch is rendering. Okay, so then we will say, we'll do this. So this next move. And we don't need to disable the button because that happens automatically with this check here. We don't need to determine if there's a winner because that happens automatically with, well, we do actually need to. So I'm going to leave that here. So we'll calculate if there's a winner. We already updated next move, update the square. Sorry, let's move this in here, update next move, calculate winner. We don't need to update status, but we do need to update history and reset jump to. Okay, so let's see what happens with calculate winner because that works a little bit differently now. And updating game info. So let's see how that works. So we'll get to this in a second, handling the jump. We don't need update status at all. That goes away. Updating the game info. So we update our history and then we update the UI. We don't need to update the UI. So let's go back here. We're going to say update, was it history? Yeah, so we'll just update history. No need to update the game info. Let's see. So this can go away entirely. So updating history. If there's a jump to, we're going to update our history to wipe everything that comes after it. That's good. And then otherwise we add a new item. Oh, and this needs a return, right? So if we're on a historical entry, wipe everything that comes after it. And then we don't, okay, we do, I guess we do push state. Okay, we'll leave that for now because it seems to be working. Calculate winner, that's the other thing. So we, okay, instead of let school, well, yeah, here, we'll make this easier for ourselves. We'll make a reference so I don't have to change these because I'm feeling lazy. So if lines, so we're matching the index. Yeah, okay, cool. So this will continue to work. They're just, now we're getting, instead of getting the square values, we already have those. They're just part of the array. We don't need this anymore. So I'm going to check out handle jump to in a minute, but let's try the board first. Cannot read properties undefined. Okay, so what did I mess up here? Handle squares, this button, get attribute, key. Okay. Cannot read properties of undefined. Okay. So let's see what happens here. So if there's no button or there's a winner, return. Oh, this button. It should just be button. There we go. Dumb typo. Excellent. Next player O. X, O. We've got a winner. Okay, cool. So that part is working. And one other thing I just want to show you, right? So if I click here, the next piece that focuses is here. Because Reef is diffing the DOM, I haven't completely re-rendered the UI. I'm not getting jumped up here. The next square is still the next square. It's great. Okay, so we're handling our click events and we're rendering the UI. The next thing we need to do, oh, by the way, one other reason I haven't made history a signal yet. Only this needs to be a signal because I probably will make it a signal, but when we update our history, the UI update that happens when I update the squares isn't running immediately. It gets set for the next browser paint. And so it gets batched with any other changes that happen. But I think for safety reasons, I should probably make history a signal as well. I just haven't yet. And that will also change the way we update history. Because somewhere I'm doing this, right? This history equals. And I'm slicing it. So we would need to reset it as a signal if we did that here. So yeah, maybe I'll just leave it as is because it's working. All right. So otherwise we would end up with a bunch of things that need to get garbage collected, and that's really annoying. Okay, so let's handle the jump to bit. So if it's a jump to link, or if it's not a jump to link, we bail. This jump to, we're getting the index to jump to. We're getting the matching history item, and then I don't need to set the board to the historical state. All I need to do is update the squares, right? So instead, we've got history board state index. So we're going to, oh no, we've just got history board state. Yeah, what am I doing for history? Hold on, sorry, I'm talking in circles here. Yeah, history board state. So that's the squares. We'll just update that. Okay, so we will need to theoretically re-signal this, or we can update each of the individual values. So let's loop through and just update the values. So this squares for each square index. Yeah, so instead of text content, we are going to say square how do I want to do this? So we've got each of our things. What am I doing here? I'm probably making this more confusing than I need to, but we're gonna say square equals I shouldn't have wiped out that whole thing because now I don't have the reference. Hold on, we'll do this differently. Square equals history board state index. And then we reset the next move and winner. We don't need to update status. Reload. Okay, that's not working. So let's figure out why. Square equals. So this squares, because I'm not updating the main object. Okay, yeah, there's a different way this needs to happen. History board state for let state of history board state. I actually need the index. Nope. History board state for each state index. Wow, I cannot type today. Let's do this. For each, then we go square index. There we go. Okay. Now we're good. So we're looping through the historical board state, and then for each square, we are going to, we're going to, inside this squares index, we're going to set its value to the value of the square here. That will trigger the UI update. Okay. Reload. Let's do this. Just to make it easy, go to move 1. It is not updating the state. Okay. Why is that? Okay. History, board state for each. Got this squares index equals square. Let's console log. Let's see what's happening here. Console log this squares. And see what's going on. Okay, so it has not actually updated anything in our history. Why is that? So we've got this squares, right? Console log this squares. Yeah, so I'm getting the object. What is the value of square? Is that the problem? Console log square. It's entirely possible that I'm trying to set the wrong thing. Yeah, x null O x. No, but that's not for move 1. That's not correct. Okay, so when we're updating our board state, something wrong is happening. So let's see what's going on. So if there's a jump to, this history equals. Okay. Probably has to do with this, where I'm pushing a new entry. So let's return. Let's try this. No. All right. This is one of these dumb little bugs that is going to haunt me. And it's the last piece here, so it's incredibly frustrating. So it's almost certainly related to history. So every time we update history, we're going to do this. Every time we render something, I want to log the history state. This history. I want to see what's going on. Okay, so we've got our initial history here. Board state, next move, winner. Board state, next move, winner. Same thing. So it's working. Okay. So then what happens if I hit move 1? No render. Okay. Why is that? So if we hit jump to, so I'm getting event closest jump to. We know this is running because it was before. So let's do this. Let's console log history and return. So we'll do this. And if we go to, I just want to make, is this, go to jump to 1, yeah, jump to 2. All right. So if we click it, we get our board state, but it's not the right board state. All right. If I look at this, this is not right. So what if we log the whole history? What's happening? Is it getting wiped out every time? Okay. So let's jump to. Let's look at the whole history. Yeah, so everyone is getting replaced. It's not getting appended. That's not right. All right. Let's see if we can figure out why that is. Okay, so we will go to update history, right? So if there's no, if this jump to doesn't equal null, we're doing this. That's fine. But otherwise, this history push, right. It's an array. So it's a reference. It's not like a, okay, so that's really dumb. Okay, so array from, so we need to make an immutable copy, is really the problem here. So just so we understand what's happening here, this is creating a reference to the original, not a copy of it. And that's why every time I make this update, nothing changes. So now if we do this, we see that it jumps back. The game board starts to behave the way we would expect. And we can jump back in time and view all of our historical moves. Excellent. Cool. So now we actually have a working app. Let's just go through this and quickly see what we've got going on here. So we've got our properties here. All of our state is held in properties. We are setting our default history, rendering our component, and listening for clicks. Inside the template, we are saying all the different, when the state looks like this, do this, otherwise do that kind of things. We've got this tied to our history. We're listening for different events and updating our state accordingly, which is then updating the UI. And we calculate our winner. So let's just see really quickly. This brings us down to line 286. If I look at the original web component version, we were down a fair bit further than that. So we've definitely shaved a bunch of lines of code off. I'm not 100% convinced this is less complex than the DOM manipulation version, but I can definitely see that having a single source of truth means that there's less possibility for weird conflicts and stuff. Everything that happens in the template driven by the state. So that's today's project. You can check out all the source code down in the description. Once again, if you have any questions, please leave a comment and ask. If you found this interesting, leave a comment and let me know. If there's something you want me to make a video about in the future, comment, let me know. Yeah, otherwise, please feel free to like, subscribe, share it with your friends. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you next week. Cheers.